In the history of unexplained disappearances, certain cases transcend ordinary mysteries to become something far more unsettling. They challenge our basic understanding of what's possible, forcing us to question everything we think we know about the world around us. The disappearance of the Sodder children is precisely such a case. A mystery that begins with a house fire, but quickly descends into an intricate web of impossible circumstances, inexplicable evidence, and questions that have haunted investigators for generations. Into the Unknown presents the case of the missing Sodder children. Christmas Eve 1945. In the small coal mining town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, the Sodder family home glowed with warmth against the winter night. The Second World War had just ended, and across America, families were celebrating their first peaceful holiday season in years. George Sodder, a successful Italian immigrant who had worked his way up from coal hauler to trucking company owner, and his wife Jenny had built a comfortable life for their 10 children. Known throughout town for his strong opinions, particularly regarding Italian politics and Mussolini's regime, George had created what everyone saw as the perfect American success story. None of them knew that in mere hours, their lives would be shattered by one of America's most baffling disappearances. The evening began normally enough. 5 of the younger children, Maurice, aged 14, Martha, aged 12, Louis, aged 9, Jenny, aged 8, and Betty, aged 5, had convinced their mother to let them open some Christmas presents early. Their excitement filled the house as they played with their new toys, while their older siblings, John, George Jr., Marion, and Sylvia, were scattered throughout the rooms. Their brother Joe was away serving in the military. Around 10 p.m., the younger children headed up to their attic bedroom, their excited chatter about Santa Claus echoing through the house. Marion helped the little ones prepare for bed before returning downstairs. It was a scene playing out in countless homes across America that Christmas Eve. Utterly ordinary, completely unremarkable. It would be the last time anyone would see the 5 children. At 1:30 a.m., Jenny woke to answer a wrong number phone call from a woman asking for someone she'd never heard of. As she returned to bed, she noticed several unsettling details that would later haunt her thoughts. Lights still on throughout the house, curtains undrawn, and a strange sound on the roof, like something being dropped. These small anomalies, seemingly insignificant at the time, would soon take on chilling significance. An hour later, the true nightmare began. A sound like rolling thunder shook the roof, and within minutes, smoke began filling the rooms. The fire spread with impossible speed, defying later expert analysis. George, Jenny, and 4 of their children managed to escape the inferno, but the 5 children in the attic seemed to vanish into thin air. What followed would transform a tragic house fire into something far more sinister, a mystery that would perplex investigators for decades to come. The response to the fire itself was the first in a series of inexplicable events. The Fayetteville Fire Department, just 2.5 miles away, wasn't contacted until morning. The fire chief later claimed no calls were received. When someone finally tried to call, the phone lines were dead, not burned, but deliberately cut. George's desperate attempts to save his children were thwarted at every turn, as if by design. His coal truck, which he planned to drive up to the attic window as a makeshift ladder, wouldn't start despite working perfectly hours earlier. The family's ladder, normally leaning against the house, had vanished completely. Even their water barrel, typically full, was frozen solid, though temperatures weren't low enough to explain such complete freezing. The official investigation concluded the children perished in the fire, but the evidence, or rather the lack of it, told a different story. No bones were found in the ashes, not a single trace of human remains. Fire experts would later testify that even in the hottest house fire, bones don't simply disappear. Something wasn't adding up, and as investigators dug deeper, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. In the months leading up to the fire, the Sodder family had experienced a series of unusual incidents that, in retrospect, seemed like dark omens. A stranger had appeared at the house, making his way to the back. He pointed to 2 fuse boxes and warned ominously, "This is going to cause a fire someday." Another man tried to sell the family life insurance, becoming enraged when George declined. His parting words now seem prophetic. "Your house is going up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed." The children themselves reported being watched by people in a parked car during their walks home from school. Most disturbing of all, George Jr. reported seeing someone throwing balls of fire at the house just before the blaze erupted. The investigation itself raised numerous red flags. The fire chief didn't arrive until 7 hours after the blaze began. The state police never conducted a formal investigation. Most suspiciously, the site was bulldozed and buried within 5 days, destroying potential evidence. Then came the sightings, strange, tantalizing glimpses that suggested an impossible truth. A waitress 50 miles away swore she served breakfast to all 5 children months after their disappearance. She remembered them specifically because they were quiet and well-behaved, and the oldest boy paid the bill. When shown photographs, she positively identified them as the missing Sodder children. A hotel worker in Charleston claimed they had stayed at her establishment, describing details that matched not just their appearances, but their personalities as well. A family friend insisted she saw 4 of the children in a passing car with unknown adults, heading west on Route 60. In 1968, over 20 years after the fire, Jenny Sodder received an envelope that would reignite the mystery. Inside was a photograph of a young man bearing an uncanny resemblance to how Louis would have looked as an adult. Written on the back were the cryptic words, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie," along with the following numbers, 90132 or 35. The Kentucky postmark led investigators down yet another dead end. The Sodders never accepted the official explanation. They hired private investigators who uncovered troubling connections, like the threatening insurance salesman serving on the coroner's jury that deemed the fire accidental. Another investigator, Ida Crutchfield, compiled evidence suggesting the children were taken to Italy but vanished before sharing her complete findings. The family's determination led them to erect a billboard near the fire site featuring photographs of the missing children, case details, and a substantial reward. It stood for decades, a testament to their unwavering belief that their children were alive somewhere. Modern analysis has only deepened the mystery. Fire experts note that the speed and intensity of the blaze suggest an accelerant. The cut phone lines, disabled trucks, and missing ladder point to careful preparation. The absence of remains has been deemed virtually impossible, given the reported conditions. Theories range from organized crime retaliation, possibly connected to George's outspoken criticism of Mussolini, to human trafficking, from local conspiracy to international intrigue. The evidence continues to challenge explanation. The cut phone lines suggesting premeditation and local knowledge, the disabled vehicles indicating technical expertise, the missing ladder implying careful planning, the numerous sightings suggesting survival, the mysterious photograph hinting at an orchestrated disappearance, the lack of remains defying scientific explanation, and the rushed investigation pointing to possible official involvement. George and Jenny Sodder went to their graves, believing their children were alive. They spent decades searching, following every lead, no matter how small. George died in 1969, and Jenny in 1989, their final years consumed by an endless quest for answers. Their surviving children continued the investigation, though most have now passed away themselves. The third generation of Sodders carries on the search, though time has made the trail increasingly cold. Today, nearly 80 years later, the case of the missing Sodder children remains one of America's most perplexing mysteries. What makes it so haunting isn't just its bizarre elements, but its setting and implications. Christmas Eve, a night of magic and possibility, transformed into a nightmare. A family home, the very symbol of safety and security, became the scene of an impossible disappearance. 5 children, who should have left behind some trace, some evidence, some closure, simply vanished as if they never existed. Were the Sodder children victims of a carefully planned abduction? Did they perish in a fire that somehow left no trace? Or did they, as their parents believed until their dying days, survive and live out their lives under different identities? The truth remains as elusive today as it was on that cold Christmas morning in 1945, reminding us that sometimes the most haunting mysteries occur not in dark alleys or abandoned buildings, but in the most ordinary of places, on the most ordinary of nights, to the most ordinary of families, leaving behind nothing but questions and the faint hope that somewhere, somehow, answers still exist. Remember, sometimes the most compelling mysteries are those that remain unsolved, leaving us to wonder what really happened on that cold Christmas Eve in 1945.